Chapter 1. Marked by Betrayal. Lyra Ravaran stood at the edge of the moonstone cliff, her bare feet digging into the cold, damp earth. Her long, silver-touched raven hair whipped in the breeze, and her violet eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The ceremonial mark on her shoulder, the symbol of a destined mate, burned faintly beneath her cloak, mocking her. He'd rejected her, the one who was supposed to be hers. Kaelin Dragor, son of the Silverclaw Beta, had claimed another, claimed her stepsister, Araviel, and he hadn't even looked back. Lyra's breath hitched as the wind carried the distant echo of howls, joyous, united, mating celebration howls. They were bound now, sealed, the bond she'd spent her entire life dreaming of, the sacred connection she'd prayed to the moon goddess for, was shattered, and worse, it had never meant anything to him. Her fists clenched at her sides as the truth sank deeper into her bones. She had been nothing more than a pawn, a backup, a placeholder until her perfect radiant sister returned from the northern packs. And now, Araviel was mated to the male who had once whispered to Lyra that he would defy destiny for her. "You were supposed to be mine," Lyra whispered to the empty forest. Her voice cracked, and for a moment she allowed herself to fall to her knees, the icy dirt staining her ceremonial gown. She buried her face in her hands and wept for everything she'd lost. Not just Kaelin, not just the bond, but the illusion of love. Behind her, twigs snapped, too calculated to be random. Lyra stiffened, scenting the air, pine, rain, and something darker. Power, a scent like lightning caught in a bottle. Her wolf stirred, alert but confused. It wasn't Kaelin. It wasn't anyone she knew. She rose slowly to her feet, her heart pounding not from fear, but recognition. Some primal part of her knew whoever was out there, even though she didn't understand why. Then he stepped into the clearing, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in the shadows like he belonged to them. His eyes were an unnatural gold, piercing, intelligent, dangerous. A jagged scar ran from his left cheekbone to his jaw, only enhancing the raw edge of his beauty. He didn't speak, he didn't move closer. He just watched her. "Who are you?" Lyra asked, her voice more steady than she felt. He tilted his head slightly. "You shouldn't be here. That's not an answer." "You're bleeding," he said simply, eyes dropping to her hands, now cut from falling, from betrayal. Something about the way he said it made her stomach twist. "I'm fine." "No," he said, "you're not." She opened her mouth to argue but stopped when his eyes narrowed, glowing slightly in the dark. Not just a wolf, she realized. Not just any shifter, Alpha. He radiated dominance and pain like fire in winter, and the forest itself seemed to lean toward him. "I'm leaving," she said finally. "Go back to wherever you came from." "I came from death," he replied. "And you're walking toward it." That's when the howl came, one Lyra didn't recognize. Rough, wild, a warning. The stranger's voice dropped, calm but commanding. "You shouldn't be alone tonight. They'll smell the broken bond. Some wolves. They hunt pain." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "And you?" she asked, heart thudding. "Do you hunt pain too?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "No," he said. "I protect what others throw away." Chapter 2. The Alpha in the shadows. The wind shifted. It carried with it the promise of something dangerous and ancient. Lyra felt it in her bones. The hairs on the back of her neck rose, not from fear but from instinct. Her wolf, wounded and curled tightly inside her, stirred and lifted her head. She recognized something in this stranger, but that made no sense. She didn't know him, not his face, not his voice. And yet, "Who are you?" she asked again, voice sharper this time. "Don't speak in riddles. I don't have the patience for it tonight." The golden-eyed male took a slow step forward, moonlight casting silver arcs over his strong jaw and high cheekbones. His presence seemed to ripple outward, an invisible force that made the air itself hum with tension. "My name is Thorne Calum Drakey," he said at last, and the name hit her like a thunderclap. Her eyes widened. "Thorne Drake?" she echoed. "The rogue Alpha who vanished from the Obsidian Ridge Pack 6 years ago?" His jaw flexed once. A muscle ticked near his temple, but he didn't confirm or deny it. "Are you here to hurt me?" she asked, carefully slipping a dagger from her thigh holster beneath her gown, the blessed silver edge gleaming faintly. His eyes dropped to the blade. "If I wanted to hurt you, Lyra Ravaran, I would not have warned you first." The sound of her name in his mouth made something flutter deep in her chest. unwanted, inconvenient, stupid. How do you know who I am? I've been watching the Silverclaw pack. Why? You're not the only one who was betrayed tonight. Silence fell like snow between them. Heavy, cold. Lyra stared at him, trying to read beneath his hardened exterior. The scar, the golden eyes, the commanding aura. He was an alpha, that much was obvious. But more than that, he was a wild alpha, untamed. Something dark clung to him like mist, but it didn't repulse her, it intrigued her. How long have you been watching me? She asked, voice tight. Long enough to know Kaelin doesn't deserve your grief. Her spine straightened. You don't know anything about me. I know that your wolf didn't howl when he rejected you, he said, walking closer. She didn't shatter. She burned. That means she's not done fighting. Her lips parted. You were close enough to hear that? I was close enough, he murmured, voice low. And I saw the moment your soul cracked. She didn't know why her eyes filled with tears again, but they did. Maybe it was because he wasn't pitying her. Maybe because in his eyes she didn't see judgment, only understanding. Thorne stopped just a few feet from her. Come with me, he said. Her brows shot up. Excuse me? I live beyond the whispering pines, deep in the old forest. No one will find you there. You need time to heal, to shift, to remember who you are without him. I don't even know you, she snapped. You will. Lyra stared at him. Her thoughts warred. Logic screamed at her to walk away, to shift, to return home, even if that home was now nothing more than ashes of what used to be. But her wolf stepped forward. And Lyra followed. The journey through the forest was long and silent. Shadows twisted between trees, and owls watched from high branches. Thorne led with steady footsteps, never glancing back, as though he trusted she would keep following. Lyra's fingers brushed bark, moss, ancient stone, things untouched by her pack for decades. She had never wandered this far beyond the warded border. She was taught not to. Legends said witches lived in these woods, spirits, the remnants of feral wolves. But now she realized, those were just stories told to keep wolves like her from running too far from the leash, and now she was off it. Thorne's cabin came into view hours later. A massive lodge carved into a mountainside, its stone walls overgrown with ivy, wildflowers growing in the cracks. A soft blue glow pulsed from sigils carved into the doorframe, ancient runes, not of pack magic, but something older. Wilder. He opened the heavy wooden door and gestured for her to enter. She hesitated, then stepped inside. Warmth. The hearth was lit, and the scent of burning cedar filled the air. She could make out fur-lined chairs, old maps on the walls, weapons mounted above the mantel. A strange peace settled over her. It felt like a place not meant to impress, but to protect. Thorne moved to the hearth and threw in another log. The fire flared. You can sleep in the room to the left, he said. The sheets are clean, water's in the basin. I'll be outside if you need anything. You're not staying? She asked without thinking. He paused, then turned. If I stay, he said slowly, I might touch you. Lyra's breath caught. I can smell your grief, he continued, his voice low and rough. But beneath it there's fire, fury, and longing. I won't take advantage of that. You think I want you? She asked, voice shaking. I know you're confused, he replied, and I won't become a weapon you use to forget him. And then he left. Just like that. The door shut softly behind him. Lyra stood still for a long time, staring at the flames, unsure whether she wanted to scream, cry, or chase after him. But one thing was clear. This was not the end. It was the beginning. Chapter 3. Beneath the wolf skin. The fire crackled softly, filling the stone lodge with a low, constant rhythm, like a heartbeat. Lyra sat in the armchair closest to the hearth, her legs tucked beneath her, a thick quilt draped around her shoulders. Her ceremonial gown hung over the chair nearby, drying from where she'd washed off the dirt and blood. Now she wore one of Thorne's oversized tunics. It smelled faintly of cedar, pine, and something purely masculine. Sleep tugged at her edges, but her mind refused to rest. She kept replaying Kaelin's face in her mind, not from tonight, but from all the memories she'd buried herself in over the years. The way he used to smile when he watched her spar, the way he once laced their fingers together beneath the moonlight and whispered that no goddess would dictate who he loved. Lies, all of it. She curled tighter into the chair and blinked hard. A knock startled her, but it wasn't at the door. It was the soft, rhythmic sound of someone chopping wood. She turned and saw Thorne through the window, illuminated by the moonlight, shirtless despite the cold, his muscles flexing with every clean strike of his axe. Steam rose from his skin, and his long dark hair was damp with sweat, plastered against his neck. She stared longer than she should have. But something about him was different. He didn't move with the arrogance of most alphas. No swagger, no performance. His strength wasn't something he wore to impress. It was something he had earned, in scars, in silence. Lyra got up, still barefoot, and padded outside. The cold slapped her, but it also cleared her head. "You never sleep?" she asked, wrapping the quilt tighter around herself. Thorne didn't stop chopping. Rarely. "Because of the nightmares?" He paused. The axe hovered midair for a second before he set it down beside the stump. "What do you know about my nightmares?" he asked. She shrugged. "You said you came from death. I've lived through enough betrayal to recognize haunted eyes when I see them." He finally turned to her, golden eyes glowing slightly in the moonlight. "Then you also know that some things are safer kept buried." "I'm not asking for your secrets," she said softly. "I just don't like being the only one with pain leaking out of her soul." Something shifted in his expression. Not sympathy, not pity, but a kind of recognition. "I came from a pack that turned on itself," he said quietly. "One where the Alpha was poisoned, the Luna slaughtered, and every heir hunted like prey." Lyra froze. Her lips parted. "I was 13 when I shifted for the first time," Thorne continued. "It wasn't a celebration. It was the night I ran for my life. I've been running ever since." She stepped closer, slowly. "Then how did you become an Alpha?" He met her eyes. "The forest chose me." The firewood snapped in the flames behind them, throwing dancing shadows across his chest. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will—" His voice was so quiet, so deep it almost didn't register as speech. She took another step toward him, until she was standing right in front of him, close enough to feel his heat. "What do you want from me?" she asked, trembling, not from cold, but from something much more dangerous, from awakening. His gaze dropped to her lips, then her neck, then her mark. The faint imprint of her rejected bond still shimmered under her skin, slowly fading with each passing day. "I want you to stop looking for worth in the male who broke you," he said, voice raw. "And I want you to remember that a broken heart still beats. That means it can still choose." Lyra exhaled sharply, throat tight. "And if it doesn't want to choose anymore, then it will still heal," he said, "because you are not his. You never were." She felt tears threaten again, not because of pain, but because someone had finally said what her soul needed to hear. "I should go back inside," she whispered, swallowing. Thorne nodded, stepping back. "I'll stay out here tonight." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I still want to touch you," he said, eyes not leaving hers. "But I won't." She turned quickly, heart hammering, and disappeared back into the cabin. Later that night, long after the fire had burned low and the night was quiet again, Lyra stood in the guest room, unable to sleep. The bed was soft, the air warm, but her body buzzed with too many questions, too many feelings she didn't want to name. She stared at the moon through the window. The same moon that once made her feel seen now felt like a cruel observer, watching her from above, silent and indifferent. But Thorne, he had seen her, and he hadn't flinched. That night she dreamed, not of Kaelin, but of a wolf, massive, black as shadow, eyes gold like wildfire, running beside her through a forest that shimmered with magic. When she woke, her skin was burning. And her wolf was howling. Chapter 4. Where the wild wolves roam, the morning sunlight filtered through the cabin's stone-framed windows in pale, golden ribbons. It painted the wooden floorboards in warm hues and caught on the dust motes swirling lazily through the air. Lyra sat in silence at the long, rustic dining table, cradling a chipped ceramic mug between her hands. The tea inside had long gone cold. She hadn't slept well. Her body had rested, yes. But her soul? Her wolf? They'd stirred beneath her skin all night, twitching and pacing just beneath the surface like something caged. Dreams of the dark wolf with golden eyes haunted her, too vivid to dismiss as imagination. The way it had run beside her through the forest, not behind, not ahead, but with her. She hadn't dreamed of Kaelin once, Thorne emerged from the back door, shirtless again, a towel slung over his shoulder, hair damp from the icy stream that bordered the far side of the woods. Lyra didn't let her eyes linger, but her wolf did. He gave her a nod and reached for a second mug, pouring himself the same herbal tea she hadn't touched. For a few moments, neither spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "You live out here completely alone?" "Yes. Why?" He sipped his tea, golden eyes watching the steam rise. "Because solitude is quieter than betrayal." Her chest clenched. That answer felt like a mirror, one that showed her own reflection too clearly. She dropped her gaze, then lifted it again. "Last night," she said quietly, "you mentioned your pack was destroyed. That you ran." His jaw tensed, the knuckles around his mug whitened. "Yes, what happened to them? The Obsidian Ridge pack? They died." She swallowed. "All of them?" Thorne finally looked at her, and the weight in his eyes was enough to drown in. The ones who didn't turn on each other were hunted by the council, declared rogue, dangerous, unfit to be ruled. "Why?" "Because we were born with God's blood in our veins," he said, his voice low, like the whisper of old thunder. "We didn't need the council to grant us power. We were power." Lyra blinked. "That's impossible, is it?" Thorne stood then, slowly. His spine lengthened, his bones cracked, and before her eyes, he shifted. But it wasn't a normal shift. There was no scream of bone, no grotesque distortion of flesh. It was seamless, like shadows pulling away from the air. In less than 2 breaths, Thorne stood on 4 legs, his wolf form enormous, his fur pitch black, his eyes molten gold. Lyra didn't breathe. He stepped toward her, slowly, carefully, and placed his heavy head in her lap. Her hands shook as she lifted them and touched his fur. It was soft, impossibly soft, like starlight and storm clouds. Her wolf pushed hard against her ribcage, howling inside her. "Touch him, accept him." When he shifted back, kneeling in front of her, panting lightly, his skin was flush with magic. The tattoos that had been faint on his human skin now glowed briefly, spirals and claw marks of ancient runes that faded as his breathing slowed. "We were created by the gods," he said. "We were never meant to be ruled. Only balanced." Lyra reached out and touched the fresh scar at his collarbone. "They tried to erase you, they almost did." She felt her throat tighten. "Why tell me this?" "Because your wolf is waking," he murmured. "And when she does, you'll need to remember who you are." Later that afternoon, Thorne led Lyra into the forest. Not through the typical trail, but off the beaten path, through thickets and over brooks until they reached a moss-covered hill crowned by standing stones. The air there shimmered with energy. "What is this place?" Lyra asked, stepping over an ancient root that pulsed with warmth. "This is where wolves are born from earth and fire," Thorne said. "It's called the Cradle." She touched one of the stones. It vibrated under her fingers, a deep hum in her bones. Her wolf reacted instantly, pressing against her skin from within, ears perked, tail high. "I brought you here," he said, "because you need to shed him, the memory, the claim." She turned. "But the rejection." "Rejection severs a bond," Thorne said. "It doesn't sever memory, and sometimes the echo of what was still lingers in your soul. If you don't release it, it will haunt every step you take forward." She stared at the ground beneath the stones. The moss curled under her toes. "How do I do it?" she whispered. "You bleed it out," he said simply. Thorne knelt beside a low stone basin at the heart of the circle. He drew a curved dagger from his belt, its edge obsidian, its hilt carved from bone. "Cut where he first touched you," he said, offering the blade. "And speak his name one last time." Lyra's hands trembled. She took the blade. She lifted her arm, and slowly, painfully, she carved a line across the place where Kaelin had first kissed her, just below her collarbone. Blood welled up, and with it, a scream. "Kaelin, Dareth of Silverclaw," she cried out, "I release you. I unbind you. I no longer carry your name, your lies, or your shadow." The stones vibrated, the earth trembled, and then silence. Her wolf surged forward, ripping through her body. And Lyra shifted. For the first time since the rejection, she shifted fully. Her wolf was glorious, white as snow, eyes silver blue, body sleek and strong. She howled into the skies, and the power of it made birds scatter and trees bend. Thorne shifted beside her. His black wolf stood silently, watching, not interfering. Then he bowed his head to her. a gesture of respect, of submission, and of kinship. That night, they returned to the cabin under a full moon. Lyra felt something new settling inside her. Not just healing, but clarity. She moved with grace, with purpose. The ache Kaelin had left behind no longer dragged her down. She was still broken in places, but now she knew how to rebuild. Thorne sat beside the fire, sharpening a blade in slow, steady movements. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "For what? For not trying to fix me, for letting me fight for myself." He looked up at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "You were never broken, just bound." She sat beside him. Their shoulders touched, and this time she didn't pull away. Neither did he. Chapter 5, The Echo of the Severed Bond. Kaelin Dareth woke up screaming. The sound ripped from his chest like claws across stone, harsh and raw, shaking the windows of the Alpha's wing in the Silverclaw compound. He lurched upright in bed, drenched in cold sweat, lungs heaving, eyes wide. The pain hit him a second later, but not physical pain, no. It was worse. It was spiritual. A tearing, searing emptiness had bloomed in the center of his chest, a hole, a wound that no healer could stitch. His wolf thrashed wildly inside him, howling in agony. "She's gone," the beast whispered. "No," Kaelin rasped aloud, gripping his chest. "She can't be." But he knew. Somewhere deep inside he knew the moment it had happened. The bond, the one he thought would always remain faint, dormant, lingering, was gone. Utterly and completely, snapped not by his rejection, but by hers. Lyra had severed him. He stumbled to the bathroom, knocked over a mirror, shattered a vase, and collapsed on the marble floor, panting like a dying animal. He hadn't wanted her. Not enough. But now, every part of him screamed that he had made a mistake so great, not even time could erase it. In the corner of the room, Zara, his chosen mate, watched in silence, arms folded over her sheer nightgown. "She cut you off, didn't she?" she said coldly. He looked up, his face contorted with disbelief. "She was never yours," Zara continued. "Only a fool thinks he can hold on to something he discards." Kaelin lunged for her, but his body betrayed him, collapsing halfway there. She didn't flinch. "You want her now," Zara sneered. "Because now she's stronger than you. Now she belongs to someone else." Back in the forests of Obsidian Ridge, Lyra stood barefoot in the soft grass near Thorne's cabin, the rising moon brushing her pale skin with silver light. Her white hair was loose, tangled from her earlier shift, and her tunic clung to her curves, damp from dew and sweat. She hadn't slept since returning from the cradle. Her energy crackled with new power. Her wolf prowled just under the surface. And strangely, she felt light. Like she'd been carrying a weight on her spine for years, and had only now realized what life felt like without it. Thorne approached silently, a basket in his arms. Roasted rabbit, root vegetables, smoked herbs. He set it down on the outdoor stone table he'd carved with his own hands. "You're glowing," he said softly, watching her from under his lashes. She turned to him, her eyes gleaming with the silver hue of moonlight. "You feel it too?" He nodded once. "The bond is gone. But something else is stirring, isn't it?" His gaze deepened. "Yes." She stepped toward him slowly. "Tell me what it is." Thorne exhaled through his nose. When a wolf rejects their mate, a vacuum is created in the soul. But when that wound is healed fully, by choice, not by force, it leaves behind something rare. She tilted her head. "What?" A blank slate. A chance for the wolf to choose again. Lyra's heart began to thump, slow and steady, like a drum calling her to battle. Or to love. "I don't want to choose too quickly," she whispered. "I don't want to fall for another lie." "I would never ask you to fall," Thorne replied. "I would only ask you to rise, with me." That night, Lyra joined Thorne on the rooftop of his cabin. Blankets layered beneath them, stars stretching endlessly above. The air smelled of pine, firewood, and the faintest trace of coming snow. Their shoulders touched again, not accidentally, not shyly, but with intention. "I used to dream of the moon," Lyra said, gazing up. "What did you dream?" "That it would answer me," she said. "That one night she'd look down and explain why I had to be rejected, why I wasn't enough, why my mate couldn't love me." "And what did she say?" "Nothing," Lyra said with a soft smile. She stayed silent. "But I think I understand now. I was never supposed to be Kaelin's." Thorne turned to look at her fully. "Who were you supposed to be?" She met his eyes, And then, without warning, without drama, she leaned in and pressed her forehead to his. Their breaths mingled, her heart pounded. His stayed steady. "We don't have to rush," she said softly. "But I feel something when you're near me. Something that scares me." "Then let it scare you," he murmured, brushing her cheek with the backs of his fingers. "I'll protect the part of you that still trembles." Lyra closed her eyes, and for the first time since Kaylin's rejection, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. A future with golden eyes, black fur, and strength that didn't cage, but shielded. Meanwhile, in Silverclaw territory, word had spread that Lyra was gone. Vanished. No trace, no scent trail. The pack murmured in corners. Some said she'd gone rogue. Others whispered of dark magic, of the obsidian Alpha who lived in the woods. Kaylin stood at the edge of the training field, fists clenched. His beta approached. Joran, a broad-shouldered male with sharp eyes and a loyal heart. "She's not coming back," Joran said flatly. "She will," Kaylin growled. "She's mine." "She was yours," Joran corrected, "and you threw her away." Kaylin turned, eyes glowing bright gold with fury. "She was weak, sentimental." "No," Joran said quietly. "She was loyal, and you don't get loyalty back once you kill it." Kaylin's mouth twisted, but inside he knew, he had lost her. And something ancient, something wild, was claiming her now. Chapter 6, The Awakening of Moonfire. Lyra couldn't explain the feeling. It started as a whisper, a soft tug behind her navel. Not physical, spiritual. Every time she was near Thorne, the whisper grew louder. It didn't demand. It didn't scream. It sang. Sometimes she caught herself listening. And sometimes she sang back. 3 days had passed since she'd severed her bond with Kaylin beneath the sacred stones of the cradle. 3 days of morning runs with Thorne through the mists of the Obsidian Ridge, of training sessions where he taught her how to move like her wolf and not just shift into her. "Don't fight her," he said, again and again. "Let her lead." She was beginning to understand. Her wolf was more than a part of her. She was a twin soul, primal and ancient. For so long, Lyra had kept her silenced, leashed by fear and heartbreak. But now, she was learning to trust again, to surrender. The nights were different too. They never touched, not fully. Never crossed the invisible line that separated friendship from something more. But Thorne's presence beside her in the quiet hours of moonlight brought a warmth she hadn't felt in years. He would build a fire outside the cabin, and they'd sit in silence under the stars, shoulders brushing, sometimes talking, sometimes not. It wasn't the silence of strangers. It was the silence of souls learning how to breathe next to each other. One morning, while gathering herbs from the western slope, Lyra felt the first true surge. She'd been kneeling in the tall grass, fingers brushing over a patch of white-flamed wildflowers Thorne called Moonfire bloom, said to be sacred to wolves who carried divine blood, when her chest tightened, not with pain, with power. Suddenly the world around her sharpened, the rustle of leaves was louder, the heartbeat of a rabbit 20 feet away pulsed in her ears. Her vision blurred, then cleared, glowing faintly silver around the edges. Her wolf surged forward inside her, not to shift, but to warn. Something was coming. No, not coming. Something was awakening. Her fingers trembled above the Moonfire bloom. The flowers began to glow faintly under her touch, a light so soft it looked like starlight woven through silk. A gentle wind whipped around her, even though the forest had been still. Then, a voice, a whisper in the wind, old, feminine. Beautiful and terrible all at once. "Daughter of shadowed flame, the moon sings for you." Lyra staggered back. Her breath came fast. The voice was gone. But the glow remained. That evening, Lyra told Thorne what she'd seen. They sat beside the fire pit, smoke curling into the indigo sky. The flames danced over Thorne's angular features, casting half his face in gold, the other in shadow. He didn't interrupt once. When she was done, he turned to the fire, jaw clenched. "You touched Moonfire bloom with bare skin. No wolf has done that in generations." "I didn't know I wasn't supposed to," she whispered. "It's not forbidden," he said. "It's impossible. Moonfire only glows when touched by a soul descended from the goddess of light and winter. Only one line has ever carried that blood." "Which line?" she asked softly. He looked at her. The obsidian. Her stomach dropped. "I thought I was just a healer's daughter," she said faintly. "Born under a red moon. Nothing special, He reached into the collar of his shirt and pulled out something she'd never noticed before. A shard of dark crystal, smooth and pulsing faintly with violet light. It hung from a leather cord, resting against his chest. "You were born of the red moon," he said. "That makes you very special." "What is that?" she asked, eyeing the stone. "It's called a Lyra crystal," he said. "It comes from the temple beneath the ridge. Only alpha bloods born of ancient lines can wield it." She stared at him. "Why show me now?" "Because when you touched that flower," he said, voice low, "I felt it. Across the ridge, it pulled at my wolf like a howl in the night. I've never felt anything like it." "You think this is some kind of prophecy?" she asked, half joking. Thorne didn't smile. "I think you are the reason the gods left the door open." She blinked. "What door?" He stood and walked a few paces away, staring into the dark trees. "When our pack was destroyed," he said, "the ancient bloodlines scattered. The ones like mine, the ones the council feared, were hunted to near extinction. We were told the gods had abandoned us, that there would be no more chosen wolves, no more moonblessed. But I touched the flower," she whispered. He turned. "Yes. And that means the gods have chosen again." In the Silverclaw stronghold, Kalen paced like a caged beast. He had sent scouts, none returned. He had sent spies. One came back, broken and raving about black fire, howling shadows, and a she-wolf made of ice and moonlight. "Lyra has awakened something, his beta," Joran said quietly. Kalen snarled. "She was nothing before me." "No," Joran said, "she was yours. But now, she's herself." Kalen slammed his fist into the stone wall. But even he could feel it, the shift in the air, the way the wind tasted different, the way his wolf recoiled when he tried to summon her scent. She wasn't just gone, she was rising. Later that night, back in the cabin, Lyra sat on the bed, brushing her hair out slowly. Thorne stood at the doorway, watching her, something soft and reverent in his gaze. "You should rest," he said. "I don't think I can," she admitted. "My skin feels too tight, like something's trying to break through." He hesitated. "It is. You're changing. What if I can't handle it?" "You can. What if I don't want to become who the gods want me to be?" His voice lowered. "Then become who you want to be, and I will stand beside her." She turned to him. He looked like he wanted to step closer, but didn't, so she did. She crossed the floor and stood before him, chest rising and falling. Her hand lifted, hesitating just inches from his chest. He didn't move, didn't breathe. "I don't know what we are," she whispered. He met her eyes. "Then let us find out," slowly. And when her fingers touched the center of his chest, above the beating heart of an alpha who had lost everything, a spark leapt between them. Not passion, not lust, but recognition. Not the savage pull of the mate bond, but the gentle hum of destiny. Chapter 7, The Temple Beneath the Ridge. The wind was different. The morning Thorne led Lyra into the forest. It wasn't colder, but older, charged. It threaded through the pines like it remembered something the world had forgotten. Birds were silent, leaves barely rustled. Even the shadows kept still, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Lyra's boots crunched softly on the moss-covered trail. Beside her, Thorne moved like a ghost, silent, fluid, aware of every tree, every gust, every heartbeat of the land. "You've walked this path before," she whispered, more a statement than a question. "Yes," he said quietly. "Only once, when I was 15. "What happened?" He paused, brushing his fingers over a low-hanging pine branch. "I saw the temple, I touched the stone, and when I came out, my father was dead." Lyra stopped. He turned. "It was his choice," Thorne continued, voice like stone against steel. "The old Alpha tradition, blood for legacy. He gave his life so I could inherit the truth of our line." "I'm sorry," she said, swallowing the ache in her throat. "He died with peace in his eyes," Thorne said, "because he believed I'd be the last." "The last what?" He met her gaze. "The last Obsidian Alpha. Until you—" The temple wasn't visible, not to the untrained eye. It sat beneath the mountain, hidden behind a waterfall that didn't echo. A wall of rushing water streamed down over jagged black rock, but the sound of it was muted, as if even the roar of water knew to hush before the gods. Thorne approached the water and pressed his palm to a slab of stone beside it. Symbols, ancient and glowing faintly blue, flickered under his skin. The ground trembled, and then the waterfall parted. Lyra gasped softly. Behind the veil of water was a narrow tunnel of obsidian rock and ancient vines, pulsing faintly with light. "Stay close to me," Thorne said. "I'm not afraid," she replied. He smiled, not with pride, but with reverence. "You should be." They walked for what felt like hours, down into the mountain. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became. The walls of the tunnel shimmered with tiny crystals that flickered in response to Lyra's presence, glowing brighter when she passed. The stone felt alive. Eventually, the narrow path widened into a massive subterranean chamber. Lyra's breath caught. The temple was unlike anything she'd ever imagined, not carved by hand, but shaped by nature and power. Pillars of glowing crystal stretched from floor to ceiling like frozen lightning bolts. A wide dais rested at the center, framed by an arch of bones so ancient they shimmered like pearl. Symbols moved across the stone floor beneath their feet, living runes that whispered in a forgotten language. And in the center of it all, hovering above a raised altar, was a blade. Long and thin, made of shadow glass and moonlight, its hilt pulsed with silver veins. The air around it shimmered with power, too thick to breathe. Lyra stepped toward it. Thorne's voice stopped her. "Only the chosen may touch it." She turned to him. "How do we know I am?" He didn't blink. "We don't, but the gods do." She stepped forward. Each footfall echoed like a drumbeat in a tomb. As she neared the altar, her heartbeat slowed, not from fear but from something deeper, as though her soul were aligning to something older than time. Her hand lifted, trembling. The moment her fingers brushed the hilt, the chamber exploded in light, not outward, but inward. A burst of cold fire filled her veins. She gasped, falling to her knees, visions slamming into her mind one after another. A woman with moonlight in her eyes, standing on a battlefield of ash, a wolf made of stars, howling over a silver lake, a crown of antlers and frost. A baby, marked by red moonlight, swaddled in a cloak of black fur. "You are the first and the last," a voice whispered in her head. "You are the flame reborn." When the light faded, Lyra was on the floor, breathing hard, the blade in her hand. It didn't cut her. It glowed, silver and white and alive. She looked up at Thorne, whose face had gone pale. "What did you see?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She met his gaze. "I saw the goddess, and she called me her flame reborn." They left the temple in silence. When they emerged from the tunnel and stepped into the moonlight, Lyra's hair was glowing faintly silver at the ends. Her eyes, too, no longer soft blue, but shimmering with shifting streaks of gold and frost. Thorne turned to her slowly. "You've changed," he said. "I know," she replied. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked. "Yes," she breathed. "The new bond, between us," she nodded. It wasn't the violent pull she'd once felt toward Kaelin. It wasn't consuming or desperate. It didn't demand. It waited. A thread of golden light between them, anchored in trust, not destiny. And it was growing stronger every day. In the capital, the council chamber's news traveled fast. A young she-wolf with silver fire in her eyes had entered the Temple of the Ridge and emerged with the blade of the Moonfire. A girl once thought dead, rejected, forgotten, now touched by prophecy. The council sat in silence around the circular stone table, their robes heavy, their faces grim. "She must be contained," one of them hissed. "She must be controlled," another said. "No," came a cold, steely voice from the shadows. "She must be watched, and if she rises too far, she must be ended." Kaelin Dareth stepped into the light, his eyes glowing gold. "I'll bring her back," he said. "Or I'll bring back her ashes." Chapter 8. The Blade and the Burden. The blade had no weight, not in her hand, but in her soul. It was heavy enough to crack her open. Lyra stood in the clearing behind the cabin, the Moonfire blade balanced across her palms. The dawn had barely risen, but she was already drenched in sweat, not from exertion, but from resistance. The blade wasn't just a weapon. It was alive. It knew her. Every time she swung, it shifted, adapting to her form. Sometimes it elongated, other times it curved into a crescent or shattered into twin daggers of silver light. But only when she moved with her heart clear, with intention. If her thoughts wandered, if doubt crept in, the blade would vanish from her grip like mist. Thorne watched her silently from a distance, arms crossed, shadowed eyes following every movement. He'd said little since they left the temple, but she could feel him, watching her, not as an alpha watches a warrior, but as a man watches something he was never meant to want. Again, Thorne called. Lyra gritted her teeth, rolled her shoulders back, and steadied her breath. She summoned the blade. It responded instantly, flickering into her hand like a star pulled from the sky. "Good," Thorne murmured. "Now try the arc formation." She spun, letting the blade sweep around in a wide crescent. Energy hummed beneath her skin. Her wolf surged forward, lending speed. The grass around her feet crackled with frost. Then suddenly, the blade shattered mid-swing, dissolving into a puff of glowing silver mist. She stumbled forward, breath catching in frustration. "No, you lost focus," Thorne said. "I didn't. You doubted yourself." Lyra spun toward him, anger flashing in her eyes. "I don't doubt myself, I doubt this." She gestured to the blade, to the ancient prophecy, to the goddess who whispered in her dreams, because none of it makes sense. "I was no one a week ago. I was the rejected. Now I'm supposed to be some fated savior?" Thorne's gaze darkened. He walked toward her slowly, the tension between them stretching like a bowstring pulled taut. "You were never no one," he said, his voice a low growl. "You were hidden, buried. That doesn't make you less, that makes you dangerous." She stared at him. "Why do you believe in me?" He stopped just a breath away. "Because," he said slowly, "I felt you before I ever saw you. In every storm, in every shadow, and when I looked into your eyes that night at the ridge, I knew. The gods don't choose lightly. And they chose you." The air between them throbbed. Lyra's chest rose and fell. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast and sharp and terrifyingly beautiful. She turned away, because if she didn't, she might fall into him. And she wasn't ready, not yet. That night, she dreamt of fire. Not the kind that burns, but the kind that purifies. She stood on a battlefield, her blade glowing like the moon, wolves of light and shadow circling her, and ahead, Kalen. His golden eyes hollow, a crown of bone on his head. His hand held a chain of broken mate bonds like trophies. He smiled. "You can't run from me, Lyra," he said. "You were mine." She raised her blade. "No," she whispered. "I was never yours." Then she swung. And the vision shattered. She woke before dawn, breath ragged. Thorne stood at the window. He'd heard her scream. He always did. She stood, brushing tangled hair from her face. "The dreams are getting worse." "I know," he said softly. "I hear you calling out." "I see him," she said. "Kalen, he's changed. Something's taken him." Thorne's jaw flexed. "He's not just hunting you anymore, he's becoming something else. Something darker." She walked toward him, barefoot on the wood floor. The space between them crackled with unsaid things. "I don't want to fight him," she admitted, "but I will." Thorne turned to her fully, something raw in his eyes. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "Something I've kept from you." Her breath caught. "What is it?" He looked down, then back up. "When I first found you in the snow," he began, voice low, "I knew who you were, not just by scent, but by memory." Her brows furrowed. "Memory? I saw you once. Years ago. You were just a child. And you were glowing. Your wolf had shifted early, pure silver and wild. I was passing through the borderlands when I saw you from a distance, and I remembered thinking, she's going to change everything." Lyra's mouth parted. "I kept that memory like a secret. And when I found you again, bleeding, broken, I knew you were the same girl. The prophecy child. The goddess's flame. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd run. Afraid I'd lose the only soul who made the darkness feel like home." Silence. Then, Lyra stepped close, lifted her hand slowly, and pressed her palm to his chest, over his heart. It beat fast beneath her fingers. Thorne swallowed. "This bond," he whispered, "isn't like the one you had before. It's not forced, not claimed, it's chosen, every day." "And I choose to trust you," Lyra said. His eyes closed briefly, like her words were a balm he didn't know he needed. They didn't kiss, not yet. But the promise was there, woven between their pulses. Meanwhile, Kalen stood at the edge of the forbidden glacier, cloak whipping around him. His eyes burned gold, and his fingers gripped a blood-stained map. The council had warned him not to cross this land. But Lyra was near. He could feel her. The moment she took the blade, something inside him snapped. His wolf, once calm, now snarling. His soul, once tied to hers, now twisted with rage and obsession. "She was mine," he growled to the wind. "She is mine. He stepped onto the glacier, and the ground trembled. Behind him, a shadow followed, cloaked, hooded. "You will not survive this path alone," the stranger said. Kaelin turned. "I don't plan to survive. I plan to win." Chapter 9. The Oracle's Hollow. The forest changed as they entered the hollow. Gone were the familiar evergreens and scattered birch. Here the trees were silver-barked and whispering. Their leaves shimmered with soft blue veins, and when the wind blew, it carried not sound, but memories. Faint whispers of forgotten ancestors echoed between the branches, too fragmented to understand. Lyra stepped through carefully, her boots sinking into moss that pulsed with ancient energy. Every root and rock hummed beneath her skin like the land recognized her, acknowledged her, feared her. Thorne walked beside her, unusually quiet. She glanced at him. "You've been here before?" He nodded. "Only once. Every Alpha must visit the Oracle before the full ascension. Most don't return the same." Lyra swallowed. "What does that mean?" Thorne's eyes were solemn. "It means the Oracle shows you not just the future, but your truth. Every lie you tell yourself. Every shame you've buried. You face it all." She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Then I'll face it." He touched her wrist gently. "You don't have to do this alone." She looked at his hand, then up at him. "I never thought I'd have someone who said that," she said quietly. "Someone who stayed." "I'm not going anywhere," Thorne said, voice firm. "Even if what you see breaks you, I'll still be here. I'll hold every shattered piece." The air between them hummed with something raw, tender, and charged. But before it could spark into more, the forest opened, and the hollow lay before them. The Oracle's hollow wasn't a cave. It wasn't a temple. It was alive. A ring of stones, each carved with celestial markings, surrounded a still pool that reflected the sky, though no stars shone above. The air was thick with power, not dark, not light, but ancient. In the center, a figure stood cloaked in midnight. Her skin was the color of moonlight on snow. Her eyes were milky white, though they pierced straight through Lyra's soul. The Oracle. "Lyra Mavrin," the Oracle said, her voice echoing like a ripple in the still water. "Child of fire and frost, wolf of the lost moon, the hollow has waited for you." Lyra stepped forward, heart thudding. "You know who I am?" "I knew you before your first breath," the Oracle said, "before your soul chose its vessel. You were forged in the flames of a fallen goddess, and birthed in silence so loud, the stars themselves wept." Thorne remained still, his hand at the hilt of his blade. He knew better than to interrupt. "Why was I hidden?" Lyra asked. "Why was I cast aside?" The Oracle raised a pale hand, gesturing to the water. "Come, look, see what they buried." Lyra stepped to the edge and stared into the pool. It shimmered, and then it changed. She saw a woman, tall, fierce, cloaked in silver fur, running through a snowstorm, cradling a newborn wrapped in black. "She's your mother," the Oracle finished. Her name was Kalea. She was the last flame-bearer, direct descendant of the Moonfire goddess, hunted, hated, and betrayed. The vision shifted. Kalea was surrounded by wolves. Some bowed, others bared fangs. One stepped forward. Kaelin's father. He promised to protect her, the Oracle said. Instead, he stole her child and ordered her death. The prophecy scared him. He feared you would eclipse his bloodline. Lyra trembled, tears prickling. "He took me to hide me?" "No," the Oracle whispered. "To claim you. He gave you to a family loyal to him. Placed a seal over your wolf to keep your power dormant, until the day Kaelin was of age to mark you and claim your strength as his own." Lyra's vision blurred. "He never loved me." "No," the Oracle said gently. "But Thorne does." Lyra looked up sharply. "What?" The Oracle's blank eyes turned toward Thorne, who froze like he'd been struck. "Even when he tried not to," she said. "Even when he thought it was weakness. He has loved you in silence since the moment he saw you in the snow, not because of the prophecy, not because of fate, but because your soul called to his." Thorne's throat bobbed as he looked at Lyra. Her lips parted, but no words came. The Oracle stepped back. "You have seen what you are. Now you must choose. Will you become the flame, or will you let the world burn?" Lyra stared into the water one last time. She saw herself standing atop a mountain, the Moonfire blade glowing in her hand. Behind her, wolves howled. Before her, darkness bled into the sky, and she was not afraid. "I choose to fight," she whispered. The pool stilled, the air shifted. The hollow approved. Then rise, Lyra Mavrin, the oracle intoned. The flame has awakened. Meanwhile Kylan stood in a crater of cracked white stone. His breath fogged the air, but the cold didn't touch him anymore. He held a piece of obsidian, one stolen from the Temple of the Ridge. Blood dripped from his palm. The stranger in the cloak stood across from him. You must say the words, the voice hissed. Bind her power to the old one. Only then will she return. I don't want her broken, Kaelin growled. Too late, the voice rasped. She is already lost to another. Kaelin's rage exploded. He slammed his fist into the ground. Ice splintered, snow erupted, and beneath the cracked surface something stirred, a growl. A deep, ancient growl. Not a wolf. Something older. Kaelin grinned. She will come for me, he whispered, and I'll make her mine again. One way or another. Later that night, Lyra sat near the fire Thorne had built, knees drawn to her chest, the blade resting beside her like a trusted companion. She hadn't spoken much since the vision. Thorne handed her a piece of dried meat and sat beside her, his arm brushing hers. Say it, she whispered. He looked at her. Say what? That you love me. The silence that followed was thick. It stretched like the sky before a storm. Then, I love you. Not a whisper, not a sigh, a vow. She turned to him. Even if I fail? Especially then. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in days she slept without dreams. Chapter 10, Echoes of War. They crossed the final ridge just as the moon dipped low behind the pine-covered mountains, its silver light turning the snow-laced path ahead into a corridor of shadows. Lyra hadn't spoken since they left the oracle's hollow. She walked with purpose now, shoulders straighter, eyes sharper, every step infused with the weight of knowing. The Moonfire blade rested across her back, humming against her skin like a second heartbeat. The wolf inside her was no longer curled up and wounded. It was awake, pacing with quiet fire in her veins. Thorne walked beside her, one hand always hovering near his belt where his twin daggers hung. He hadn't said much either, but his nearness was a constant comfort, like a shield she didn't have to ask for. As they crested the final slope, they saw it, the pack's outermost watchtower, and it was gone. No smoke, no debris, no bodies, just absence. A perfectly circular crater cut clean through the snowy woods like a knife had scooped the tower from the world. Lyra froze. Thorne's face turned to stone. He sniffed the air. No scent, no blood, just ash. Magic, Lyra said softly, voice low. Not natural, not elemental, something old. He crouched near the rim, brushing snow from a blackened stone. This isn't from a witch. She knelt beside him. Then what? Thorne glanced at her. Something worse. They didn't need to say it. Kaelin. When they returned to the heart of the Packlands, everything had changed. The guards on the gates stiffened at the sight of them, relief flashing across their eyes, followed immediately by worry. Inside, the village center was alight. Torches blazed along every fence post. Wolves shifted to human form and whispered. Warriors in full battle leathers paced. Children were gathered and locked away in protective dens. The wind howled over the rooftops. But it wasn't winter's howl. It was the sound of coming war. The moment Lyra stepped into the council house, all voices ceased. 12 alphas, 1 high seer, 2 mages, and now, her. She felt their gazes pierce her like frost-tipped arrows. But she didn't flinch. She met each gaze head-on, her presence aflame amid their suspicion. Thorne followed closely behind, standing at her back without a word. Elder Malric, the oldest of the alphas, stepped forward. The Moonfire blade has returned, and so has she. Lyra tilted her head. You know me? I know your blood, he said, voice gravel thick. I fought beside your mother. I saw her fall. And I swore to the stars I'd never let her daughter face what she did. Then help me, Lyra said. Because the thing that's coming, Kaelin, is not the boy you once trained. The room stirred. One of the younger alphas, a pale-eyed man named Ryan, scoffed. And what would you know of it? You were his mate. Lyra stepped forward, voice sharp as a blade. He rejected me, marked another in secret. And now he hunts me like prey. Gasps, murmurs. Thorne's energy darkened behind her, his rage barely leashed. She continued. He's not just hunting me, he's wielding something unnatural. Magic that erases. He destroyed one of our towers, not with claws or fire. With void. Ryan bared his teeth. You expect us to believe that? Malric raised a hand. She speaks truth. The void has not touched our lands in over 1,000 years. If it has returned, then she is our only chance." The High Seer stepped forward. She wore blue robes embroidered with ancient constellations. Her hair was silver and braided with bone charms. Her eyes were not mortal. "The Moonfire goddess does not call lightly," she said. And this child was marked before her first cry. She gestured to Lyra. "Show them." Lyra hesitated. Then she reached up and pulled the collar of her tunic aside, exposing the bare skin between her neck and shoulder blade. The packmark she once bore, Kaelin's, was gone. In its place was a glowing sigil, a crescent moon cradling a silver flame. It pulsed slowly like a heartbeat, visible beneath her skin. "Not a mate bond," the High Seer said, "a divine seal." Thorne watched the room shift. Fear, wonder, reverence, and still, resistance. Lyra pulled her collar back up. "You don't have to trust me, but if you wait too long, there won't be a pack left to save." Later, in the quiet of Thorne's cabin, the fire crackled low. The sky outside bled pink and lavender. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, unlacing her boots with stiff fingers. Thorne watched her, arms crossed near the window. "What they said," he began. "About you being his mate." She didn't look up. "It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me." She met his eyes then. He stepped toward her, slow but sure. "I need to know, when you look at me, do you still see him?" She stood, the firelight painted gold across her skin. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. "No," she whispered. "When I look at you, I see the first person who stayed. I see the one who gave me a sword when all I had was a scar. I see the man who loves me without needing to own me." He was in front of her now. "I see home," she said. And this time, when they kissed, it wasn't out of desperation. It was a claiming, a choosing. Their lips met slowly, like a sunrise breaking through clouds. His hands found her waist, her fingers curled into his hair. It wasn't frantic or hurried. It was quiet, devastating, real. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads pressed, Lyra whispered, "Whatever comes next, I won't run." "I wouldn't let you," Thorne said, voice rough. "I know," she said, smiling faintly. "That's why I love you." And in that moment, though the world outside trembled, they were whole. Meanwhile, Kaelin stood before an altar carved into ice. He bled freely now, offering after offering, each drop another tether cut from the boy he once was. The dark power he'd awakened whispered to him in a tongue older than the moon. The cloaked figure beside him removed their hood, revealing obsidian skin etched with glowing runes. "You are ready," the figure said, ready to become what she feared. Kaelin grinned. His teeth were sharper now. "Then let the gods watch," he snarled. "Let them try to take her from me again." The ice beneath him cracked, and from it something clawed its way up, something not wolf, not beast, not man, a shadow given form. It bowed to Kaelin, and the world tilted. Chapter 11. The Binding Trial. The moon rose blood red. It hung low over the horizon like a burning eye, casting the entire veil in copper light. The air was unnaturally still, no wind, no rustle of leaves, not even the distant call of night birds. Just silence. The kind of silence that came before something terrible, the kind of silence that demanded reverence. Lyra stood barefoot at the edge of the stone circle, her hair loose around her shoulders, silver threads woven through the strands by the seers. The robe she wore was paper-thin, made from the woven silk of moon moths, so delicate it moved even without wind. But her face was hard as steel, determined. The binding trial would begin soon. She had no weapons, no allies inside the circle, no spells, no protection, only herself. And if she failed, the Moonfire blade would reject her, and she would die. Thorne stood beyond the circle's boundary, hands clenched at his sides. He was forbidden from stepping in. Even as Alpha, the laws of the binding were older than his bloodline. Ancient. Only the chosen could endure the trial. No one could help her, not even him. Malric stood beside him, hood pulled low. "She's stronger than any wolf I've seen." Thorne didn't respond. Malric glanced at him. "But strength alone may not be enough." Thorne's jaw ticked. "She'll make it." The elder grunted. "You love her." A muscle in Thorne's cheek twitched. "Does it matter?" "It does now," Malric said, eyes gleaming. "Because if she survives this trial, she'll be more than your equal. She'll be the Alpha of Flame, and the only one who can end Kaelin." Thorne's breath caught. "She might not need you at all." But before Thorne could respond, the seers began to chant. The air pulsed, the circle glowed, and the trial began. Lyra knelt at the center as the world tilted. Flames spiraled up from the carved runes beneath her knees, encircling her like a crown of fire. But they didn't burn. Not yet. She closed her eyes. "Open to me," she whispered. "I am Lyra Mavrin, child of Kalea, born of frost and fire. I offer myself not to be ruled, but to rise." The flames answered, and then she was falling, not physically, not entirely, but her soul tumbled backward through time and memory, through every pain she'd ever hidden, every wound that still bled inside her heart. She stood suddenly in a field of blood, her childhood home, ashes and bone, her foster parents, dead, her younger brother, throat slit. Her wolf had locked these visions deep inside her, a cage made of denial, but now the cage was gone. Lyra dropped to her knees, heaving. "Why must you see this?" a voice asked. She turned. It was her. A mirror of herself, pale, cracked, glowing with cold fire. "Because truth sets us free," Lyra gasped. "No," the mirror Lyra said. "Truth destroys." She touched Lyra's face. "You will lose everyone. You will burn them all, even him." Lyra shook her head. "I would rather burn for them than watch them fall." And the flames engulfed her. She screamed, but not from pain, from release. She let go of her fear, her shame, her guilt. And when the fire faded, she stood alone, wrapped in white flame. Not consumed, not broken. Transformed. The chanting stopped. Thorne stumbled forward, eyes wide. The flames had died. Smoke curled lazily from the stones. And then... a soft step. Lyra emerged, eyes glowing faintly silver gold. The Moonfire blade cradled in her hand like it had always belonged there. She was different. Her scent had changed, still wild, still familiar, but now laced with something untouchable. Divine. The crowd bowed. But she looked only at Thorne. He stepped forward, hesitant. "Lyra?" She smiled. "Still me, just more." She stopped in front of him. "Did I pass?" He couldn't speak, he just pulled her into his arms. The pack watched in reverent silence as their alpha and his fated mate held each other. But no one saw the shadow that slithered across the mountainside. Later that night, Thorne's cabin, the air between them crackled. Lyra stood by the hearth, freshly bathed, wrapped in a long gray tunic that brushed her knees. Her hair dripped down her back like dark silk. She hadn't spoken much since the trial ended, and Thorne gave her space. But now, as she turned to him, her eyes held a question that burned between them like fire. "Do you still see me?" she whispered. Thorne crossed to her slowly, stopping only inches away. "I see you. The woman who saved me before she even knew I was bleeding." She looked up at him, pupils blown wide. "I dreamed of you," she said, voice hushed. "When I was a child, I used to see a boy in my dreams. Strong, angry, lonely. I didn't know who he was. Until I saw you." His breath hitched. "Lyra," she kissed him. Softly, slowly, and this time it was more than longing, it was belonging. He lifted her effortlessly, carried her to the bed, laid her down with care like she was made of star glass and moonfire. Clothes fell away. Hands explored slowly, not rushed, not desperate. They made love like it was a promise, like it was fate rewriting itself. Elsewhere, Kaelin stood in a ring of bones, surrounded by the half-born monsters he'd summoned from the void. The creature at his side, the shadow spawn, snarled as Kaelin lifted a black dagger. "The Alpha of Flame is reborn," his master rasped. "You must act now." "I know where she is," Kaelin said, eyes wild. "And I'm coming." The shadow spawn grinned, and the world trembled. Chapter 12. The price of power. Morning broke on wings of frost. Dawn light poured through the snow-covered pines like molten silver, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Warriors were already assembled, sharpening blades, shifting forms, chanting oaths. The air buzzed with anticipation, with fear. At the center of it all stood Lyra. Her boots were planted firm in the earth, her posture tall despite the weight of what she carried. The Moonfire blade gleamed against her back like a slash of starlight. Every time she touched it, the blade responded, thrumming, flickering, as if whispering to her in a forgotten tongue. She felt its hunger. Not for blood, for justice. But as she adjusted the leather straps across her shoulders, she caught sight of the approaching figures, robes and armor, the sigils of the Pack Council gleaming beneath their cloaks. Thorne trailed behind them, his face shadowed with worry. Lyra braced herself. Elder Malric stepped forward first, flanked by 2 other alphas and the High Seer. "We need to talk," he said gruffly. "Now." The chamber smelled of burning sage and old stone. Snowmelt dripped from the arched windows, gathering in shallow pools along the floor. Lyra stood alone in the center of the circle. The Moonfire blade rested in a ceremonial scabbard beside her. Elder Malric's expression was unreadable. "You are now bonded to the blade of flame, chosen by the Moonfire goddess herself. No wolf alive doubts your strength, but power, when untempered, is dangerous, even in the hands of the worthy." Lyra's brow arched. "So, you want to temper me?" The High Seer raised a hand. "Not you, the weapon." A soft gasp echoed from one of the younger alphas. "You want me to give up the blade," Lyra said flatly. "We want to protect it," Malric said. "From Kaelin, from the void, from corruption." "I'm not corrupted," Lyra snapped. "No," the seer said, her voice softer. "But what you could become frightens them." Lyra's lips thinned. She turned to Thorne, who stood just outside the circle. He didn't speak, but she didn't need him to. His silence told her everything. He was torn. That night, the decision still weighed on her. Lyra sat beneath the whispering tree at the edge of the old burial grounds, fingers tracing the blade's hilt as the wind rustled the moonlit leaves. She could feel the weight of every soul who'd ever wielded it. Warriors, martyrs, queens. Was she worthy of them? Was she strong enough to carry it and still remain herself? "Give it up," came a voice from behind her. She turned sharply. It was Larka, Thorne's younger sister, and the best scout in the pack. She wore her bow slung across her shoulder, and her white blonde hair was braided tight to her scalp. Her eyes were red from the cold, or from something else. "You've been avoiding me," Lyra said cautiously. Larka dropped into a crouch beside her. "Because you terrify me." Lyra blinked. "Not because I think you'll hurt us," Larka added quickly, "but because you're changing, and I don't want to lose the woman who saved me from drowning in my own grief." Silence fell between them. "I don't know what I'm becoming," Lyra whispered, "but I'll fight for this pack, Larka, even if they try to stop me." Larka smiled faintly. "Then I'm with you, blade or not." Meanwhile, the shadow spawn knelt before Kaelin in the ruins of the old trade outpost. The bodies of sentries lay scattered around them, unmarked, lifeless, emptied. Kaelin stepped through the blood-slick stones, his gaze fixed on the jagged northern cliffs. He could smell her. Lyra. She was close, the shadow spawn hissed. "You cannot face her yet." "Not with the blade awakened." "I won't face her," Kaelin said. "I'll remind her." "Of what?" His grin was all teeth. "That I own her pain." Back in the Packlands, near midnight, Thorne was restless. He paced the edge of the training yard, jaw clenched, shirt plastered to his back with sweat despite the cold. Lyra had not returned from the tree. Something gnawed at him, deep, primal. Then the sky howled, and the world shook. A tower of dark flame erupted from the tree line. "Lyra," Thorne shifted mid-run, black fur tearing through his skin as he launched himself toward the explosion. The pack was already mobilizing, warriors howling, alarms echoing, but he was faster. He reached the whispering tree clearing in seconds, and what he saw shattered him. Larka lay bleeding in the snow, a deep slash across her stomach. Lyra knelt beside her, face pale, hands glowing with the faint light of healing magic. But she wasn't trained. She was failing. "No," Thorne roared, shifting back in an instant. He pressed his hands to Larka's wound, but the light in her eyes was fading fast. "She saved me," Lyra choked. "The thing, Kaelin, he sent it. It came from the dark. It tried to drag me into the void. She pushed me away." Larka's voice was barely audible. "Don't blame her." Thorne crushed his sister to his chest. "She died before he could say goodbye." The pyre was silent. No howling, no chanting, just the crackle of fire and the weight of grief. Lyra stood apart from the others, her hands clasped tight around the hilt of the Moonfire blade. Blood stained her sleeves. Her eyes were hollow. Malric approached her slowly. "This is what we feared." She didn't respond. He sighed. "Will you give it up now?" She looked at him, voice like glass. "No. You're choosing war. I'm choosing to end it. And without another word, she turned and walked into the shadows, the flame of the blade burning brighter than ever behind her. Chapter 13. The spirit price snow fell without sound. The trees stood like sentinels, frost clinging to their branches as if time itself had frozen in mourning. The land still grieved Larka's death. It pressed into the bones of the pack, thick and raw and suffocating. Lyra hadn't slept. Not in days. She hadn't cried either. Not because she wasn't broken, but because the fire inside her had become so hot, so full of fury and magic, that tears would have only turned to steam. She stood now on the edge of the wound, a sacred place carved into the heart of the mountains, where the living world touched the veil of the dead. It wasn't marked on any map. No wolves came here. Even the wind avoided it, but Lyra had no choice, not anymore. If Kaelin could reach into the void and summon monsters from nightmares, she would reach beyond the spirit veil itself and summon truth, even if it killed her. At the mountain's edge, far above the clouds, an ancient circle waited. 13 stones, each etched with glyphs older than Alpha lines. No one knew who carved them. Some said it was the Moonfire goddess herself. Others said they predated the gods. Lyra stepped into the circle barefoot, dressed in ceremonial white. The Moonfire blade lay across the altar, pulsing faintly. Around her she had laid offerings, blood from her palm, silver root, a lock of Larka's hair. She drew a deep breath. Then she began to chant. Moon above, shadow below. Ash to ash, soul to soul. I call not beast, I call not blade, I call the watchers who do not fade. The air trembled, frost spiraled upward in curling threads. The stone beneath her feet glowed with silver veins, and then the veil tore. A shriek like 1,000 weeping wolves ripped through the air, and something stepped through. It was not human, not wolf. It had no true shape, just a massive form made of shifting mist and molten eyes, antlers of bone, claws of smoke. Its voice crawled into her thoughts like roots breaking through stone. You should not be here. Lyra stood tall, though her legs trembled. I seek aid. I seek truth. Kaelin is coming. He tears holes in this world. You are tearing one now. She clenched her fists. Then help me stop him. The spirit circled her, its presence pressing on her skin like burning snow. There is a price. What? The bond. Her blood ran cold. You mean Thorne, your mate, your thread. Sever it, and I will lend you what you need. Keep it. And Kaelin may consume all. Lyra's breath hitched. How could she choose? But in that moment, she remembered Larka's body in her arms. The helplessness, the fire. She gritted her teeth. I won't sever it, she whispered. The spirit hissed like steam against ice. Then I will give you nothing. But as it turned to vanish, Lyra spoke again. You owe me. You owe this pack. I am the blade bearer, the soul flame reborn. The air shuddered. And then the spirit bowed. A tendril of silver fire slithered from its body into Lyra's chest, piercing her heart. She screamed, and when it faded, she collapsed, unconscious. But not alone. When Lyra woke, it was night again. Stars blinked lazily overhead. She was still in the circle, still alive, but different. The Moonfire blade now pulsed with 2 heartbeats, and in the back of her mind, something else breathed. The spirit hadn't left. It had fused with her. She sat up slowly, her veins thrumming with power that wasn't hers, wasn't mortal. The edges of her vision shimmered. Every sound, every leaf rustle, every wing beat was crystal clear. But she also knew this wouldn't come without consequence. Meanwhile, back at the stronghold, Thorne had shut himself away in the old war room. Larka's scent still lingered in every hallway. Her laughter echoed in the corners of his memory. Every time he blinked, he saw her dying, and he'd been too late. He gripped the sides of the ancient table until the wood cracked under his hands. Malric found him there, half-shifted, eyes glowing yellow with suppressed rage. You blame yourself, the old wolf said quietly. I should have been there, Thorne snarled. I should have protected her. You protected your mate, Malric reminded him. Thorne looked away. She's not my mate anymore. The words tasted like poison. Malric's brow furrowed. You severed the bond? No, Thorne said hoarsely. But I've started pulling away. He stared out the window. Because if she dies, I don't think I'll survive it. At the ruins of the Moon Temple, Kaelin stood shirtless beneath a blackened sky. The shadow spawn carved glyphs into his chest, runes meant to make him unkillable. Blood ran down his torso in thick rivers. All around him, the bodies of corrupted wolves writhed in pain, forming a circle of agony. Kalen raised his arms. "The gods cast me out," he whispered, "but I will make myself a god." Back in the Packlands, Lyra returned 2 nights later. Thorne met her at the gate, arms crossed, lips a thin line. She stepped close, eyes searching his. "You feel it," she said. He didn't respond. "The spirit. It's inside me now, watching, waiting. But it gave me what we need to beat Kalen." Still he didn't speak. "Thorne," she whispered, reaching for him. But he pulled back. Her hand dropped. Silence stretched. "Don't do this," she said, voice breaking. "I can't lose you too," he whispered. "You won't." But he just shook his head and walked away. Lyra stood in the falling snow, the moonfire blade at her back, a god spirit in her bones. And no one at her side. Chapter 14. Bloodlines and Battlecries. The snow fell black that morning. Ash, not frost. It drifted lazily from the sky like scorched feathers, settling over rooftops, trees, and warriors' shoulders. The sky was bruised with the early signs of war, heavy with the scent of burning pine and far-off blood. And in the middle of it stood Lyra. Her reflection stared back at her from the cracked mirror in the war room. Only it wasn't just her anymore. Her eyes still held that golden amber hue that marked her as wolf, but deep in the center a glimmer of something ancient shimmered like starlight caught in ink. She didn't flinch when the voice whispered, "Burn them before they burn you." She shut her eyes. "Be quiet." "Why? When you know I'm right?" The spirit had grown louder since the ceremony at the edge of the wound. It no longer simply lingered. It coiled. It advised. It tempted. It wanted more than just survival. It wanted conquest. Elsewhere, the old den was buried beneath a collapsed watchtower on the far edge of the eastern cliffs. Thorne moved through the rubble with practiced ease, ignoring the sting in his shoulders and the ache in his legs. He needed answers, not for the pack, not even for Lyra, for himself. The dreams had started days ago. Visions. A woman with silver eyes and a mark on her throat, half moon, half claw. His memories flickered. Sometimes he saw himself as a child, sick with fever, bones glowing under his skin. And always, the voice. "Your blood is not what you think." He finally reached what was left of the underground archive, a hidden chamber sealed with wolfsbane, silver dust, and old blood magic. Most wolves didn't even know it existed. But Thorne had found it once when he was 16. He remembered the pain. He remembered the fear. Now, he was ready to face it. It took nearly an hour to pry the vault open. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. Shelves carved from mountain stone lined the chamber, each filled with scrolls, tomes, and relics that reeked of forbidden knowledge. Thorne's hand trembled as he reached for the scroll bound in red sinew. Bloodlines of the fallen shift. He unfurled it carefully. The parchment was brittle, ink faded, but the crest at the top was unmistakable, the sigil of his house, a wolf's fang crossed over a star. But underneath, another sigil, a forbidden one, a clawed paw dripping with black fire. His breath caught. Thorne Farrellheart was not just descended from Alphas. He was the last living heir of the Nightborn line, a bloodline believed extinct. A line bred in secrecy, feared for its unstable power and ties to dual shifting. Wolf. And something else. Meanwhile, Lyra paced the outer wall, wind tugging at her hair as the first scouts returned with grim news. Kalen's army had been seen. Thousands. Not just corrupted wolves, there were creatures among them that defied nature. Elongated forms with smoke for skin and eyes that bled shadows. Some slithered without bones. Some ran faster than lightning. Some floated. All bore Kalen's mark. Lyra's heart pounded. The spirit inside her stirred. "You cannot defeat that without me. Let me rise. Let me burn for you." "No," she murmured aloud, pressing her fingers to her temple. "You hesitate and more will die. Like Larka." She froze. That was a low blow. "Shut up," she whispered. "Make me—" She gritted her teeth and stormed from the wall toward the training grounds, needing to move, to fight, to bleed. But someone was already waiting for her there. Thorne. He looked different. His eyes glowed brighter. His stance more animal than man. His scent was still familiar, still anchored in home. But something about him now hummed with wild magic. Lyra halted a few paces away. "You found something," she said softly. He nodded once. I'm not just Wolf, neither am I. They both laughed, but it was hollow. Thorne closed the gap between them. I know I've been distant, pushing you away. You don't have to explain, she said, avoiding his gaze. I do. He reached for her hand but paused inches away. Because you're my mate, Lyra. And no spirit inside you, no bloodline inside me will change that. She swallowed hard. The spirit inside her growled. Weakness, this is weakness. But Lyra wanted the weakness. She wanted him. Then stay, she whispered. When it starts, don't run again. He cupped her face, forehead resting against hers. I'll fight beside you until there's nothing left to fight. She kissed him. The bond flared, and the spirit screamed. They thought he'd hit the front lines. He didn't. Kalen sent his monsters to the nurseries, to the heart of the village where the pups slept. Screams split the air. Lyra was the first to respond. She sprinted across the rooftops, the Moonfire blade already glowing with wild fury. Thorne howled beside her, half shifted, eyes blazing. They weren't fast enough. The first nursery was already in flames. A shadow beast lunged from the smoke, jaws wide, eyes leaking black mist. Lyra struck mid-air, her blade cutting through shadow like sunlight through fog. It shrieked, a sound no child should ever hear. She killed it. But 5 others followed. The battle was chaos. She tore through the invaders, blood and ash streaking her skin. Every time she faltered, the spirit lent her a surge of fury. But the more she borrowed, the louder it became. By the time the attack was repelled, 2 nurseries had fallen. 9 pups were dead. Lyra stood amidst the ashes, soaked in gore, the blade humming hungrily. Thorne knelt beside a charred cradle, fists clenched so tightly blood dripped from his palms. And then Malric limped into view. Kalen left something behind. He dropped it in the snow. A banner. Kalen's sigil, written in a language only Lyra and Thorne could now read, "This is only the beginning." Chapter 15, Moonlight Surrender. The snow had stopped falling. The stars blinked lazily overhead, scattered like flecks of crushed diamond across the night sky. For once the Packlands were quiet, no howls of mourning, no sirens of battle, no smoke coiling into the heavens. Just stillness. And in that rare sliver of silence, Lyra found herself standing at the edge of the frozen lake where she and Thorne had once kissed for. The first time as adolescents, back when war was a distant myth and their bond had been nothing more than a blooming ache between glances. She stepped onto the ice barefoot, the spirit inside her humming beneath her skin like molten silver. You crave this softness, but softness makes you break. She ignored it. She let the cold sting her toes, the wind slip under her robe. She needed to feel tonight, not as the bearer of the Moonfire blade, not as the spirit-bound warrior destined to stop Kalen, just Lyra. The girl who once danced beneath this very moonlight. She heard him before she saw him, the low crunch of boots on snow, the familiar warmth of his presence. Thorne. He didn't speak as he approached, didn't ask questions, he simply knew. That she didn't want words tonight, that she just wanted him. When she turned, she found him watching her with those storm-gray eyes, the ones that always saw too much, the ones that never looked away from her scars. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. You'll freeze. I've burned worse, she whispered. But she didn't resist the comfort. She curled into it, into him, resting her cheek against his chest. His arms circled her slowly, carefully, like he was holding a woman who might vanish. You're shaking, he murmured. I'm scared, she admitted, of what I'll become. Then I'll hold on tighter. They found their way to an old hunter's cabin nestled deep in the pine woods, abandoned, half collapsed, but still standing. Thorne started a fire with practiced ease. Lyra stripped off the damp robe, standing before the hearth in only her undershift, steam rising from her skin as the flames licked higher. He watched her from the doorway. Something primal shimmered in his gaze, but he didn't move, didn't push. Lyra turned to face him, moonlight softening her features. You don't have to be careful with me, she said softly. I do, he said, voice hoarse. Because you're everything I've ever been afraid to want. She crossed the room in slow steps, fingers brushing the line of his jaw. I'm not afraid of you, she whispered. I'm afraid of losing you. You won't. But she could hear the doubt in his voice, so she kissed him, slowly, deliberately. And when his arms finally closed around her, she felt something inside her unravel, a knot of grief and fury and longing that had been coiled tight for too long. They didn't make love like two people trying to forget the world. They made love like two wolves claiming something sacred. Clothing was discarded without haste, skin pressed to skin with reverence. Thorne laid her down before the fire, kissed the scars along her thigh, her side, her shoulder, all the places that had bled for others. Lyra touched him like a map she already knew by heart. Their bond flared hot, golden threads wrapping around them like vines pulling them closer. Deeper. The spirit inside her hissed, jealous, bitter, but Lyra drowned it in the heat of Thorne's mouth on her collarbone, in the low growl that escaped his throat when she gasped his name. "Thorne," she breathed, nails scraping lightly down his back. "Say it again," he murmured against her skin, voice shaking. She did, over and over, as he worshipped her like a relic he'd once buried in shame and was finally allowed to unearth again. And when they both shattered, moaning, clawing, breathless, it wasn't violent. It was healing. It was coming home. They lay tangled in furs, Lyra's head on his chest, their hands still intertwined. The flames crackled quietly. "I think I loved you even before the bond," she said, tracing the line of his collarbone with her fingertip. "I know I did," he said. "I just didn't believe I deserved it." She looked up at him. "Then believe it now." He kissed her again, so softly it felt like the first snowfall of winter. For a moment, the world could have ended, and they would have been fine. But the world didn't end. It knocked. 3 sharp raps on the cabin door. Lyra and Thorne both sat up, bare skin quickly hidden beneath furs. Thorne reached for the blade he'd left by the wall. Lyra rose slowly, her senses already stretching outward. She opened the door, and there, swaying on his feet, blood dripping from his mouth, stood Malric. "They've taken the children," he rasped. "All of them." Far from the Packlands, in the heart of a black temple carved into a dead mountain, Kaelin knelt before a strange, glowing sarcophagus. Runes crawled across the stone like worms in firelight. He pressed his palm to the seal, and inside, the figure stirred. A girl with silver blonde hair, chained, asleep, marked with the same spirit glyphs Lyra bore. Kaelin smiled. "My sister," he murmured. "You were always the true weapon." Chapter 16. Claimed under moon and flame, the air was heavy with smoke and snow. The quiet they had found in the cabin was now shattered. Malric had collapsed just outside the door, blood seeping from a gash on his temple, his tunic torn, and claw marks etched across his chest. But even with the scent of blood in the air, it was his words that stole the breath from Lyra's lungs. "They've taken the children." Thorne swept him inside while Lyra worked quickly, pressing herbs to the wound, whispering spells she barely remembered from her childhood. Her fingers trembled. "How?" she asked. "How did they get past the barrier?" Malric coughed, barely able to lift his head. The barrier didn't fail. Lyra froze. "What?" It let them in." Thorne stiffened from across the room. "That's not possible. Only the High Warden can manipulate the... unless someone tampered with the core rune." Lyra finished, voice low. "Someone from inside." It was hours before Malric slept. Lyra and Thorne sat near the fire, shoulders brushing, each lost in thought. Outside, the wind howled through the trees like mourning wolves. The silence was thick between them, but not awkward. It was heavy with the weight of what they had shared the night before, and the bond that now pulsed between them. Thorne watched her fingers as she absently traced symbols into her palm, ancient ones, meant to ward off spirits. He caught her hand mid-doodle and brought it to his lips. "You're scared," he murmured. "Of what's inside me," she admitted. "I'm not." She turned toward him. "You should be." "No." His voice was firmer now, more certain, "because I've seen what's inside you, and it's still you, even the darkest part of you." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to lose myself. Then let me help you hold on." And then, without waiting for permission, he kissed her. Not the tender, cautious kind they'd shared the night before, but a kiss filled with hunger, with desperation and fire and something bordering on reverence. It made her knees weak and her pulse roar. She climbed into his lap, their mouths still locked, fingers tangling in his hair as he held her close. "I need you," she breathed, "now. All of you." Thorne carried her to the bed they'd made of wolf pelts and old quilts, laying her down like she was the most sacred thing he'd ever touched. They undressed each other slowly this time, taking in every scar, every freckle, every place where war had marked them but not broken them. When she was bare beneath him, Lyra reached up and cupped his face. No running, she whispered. Never again, he promised. Then he lowered his head and kissed her, everywhere. Her neck, her collarbone, the curve of her breast. She arched beneath him, gasping, as his mouth trailed lower, over her ribs, her stomach, her hips. He worshipped her with lips and hands and tongue until she was trembling. Only then did he settle between her thighs, gaze locked to hers. "Let me in," he said. She nodded, and when he entered her, it was not just physical. The bond ignited between them like wildfire, gold and silver threads weaving tighter, brighter, hotter. Lyra cried out, not from pain, but from the overwhelming rightness of it. She clung to him, nails digging into his back as he moved inside her with deep, reverent strokes. They made love like wolves who had waited a lifetime for this moment, like mates reclaiming what had been stolen by fate. Thorne kissed her through every rise and fall, murmuring her name like a prayer. She responded in kind, whispering words she didn't even know she remembered. Old language, the sacred tongue of the first wolves. When they reached the peak together, it was blinding. A light exploded between them, and for one breathtaking moment, Lyra saw everything, every life they had lived before, every lifetime they had loved and lost each other. Thorne had always been there, and this time, they had found each other again. They collapsed together, tangled in sheets and skin and sweat. His hand never left her waist, her lips never strayed far from his chest. "I felt it," she whispered, "the bond. It snapped into place. I felt it too." He kissed her temple. "It's done. We're mated now." She let the words sink in. "And the spirit?" "It was quiet," she said, blinking in wonder. "For the first time. It didn't fight me. Then we did more than bind to each other tonight." He pulled her closer. "You anchored yourself." She closed her eyes and let herself believe it, even if only for tonight. Meanwhile, far across the mountains, Kaelin stood at the edge of a dark chamber, watching the girl inside the runic cage begin to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, silver, eerie, hollow. She looked at him. "Brother?" Kaelin smiled cruelly. "Welcome back, Cerys." Chapter 17. The sister of ash and blood snow blanketed the forest in silence, but Lyra could feel the unrest in the air, not just in the wind that moaned between the trees or the strange metallic scent riding it. She felt it in her bones. Something ancient had awakened, something blood-bound to her soul. That night, Lyra dreamed of fire, not the wild kind that devoured homes and forests, but a cold, deliberate flame that burned in spirals, whispering secrets in forgotten tongues. The dream twisted as she ran barefoot through endless halls of glass and shadow. Every reflection in the walls showed a different version of herself, older, younger, bloodied, crowned, dead. Then she saw her, the girl from the runic tomb. Cerys. She stood at the end of the corridor, dressed in a robe of moonlight and chains. Her voice was a whisper. "You forgot me, Lyra." Just like they wanted. Lyra tried to run toward her, but her feet turned to stone. "I waited for you, but he came first." Cerys's eyes turned pitch black. The dream shattered. Lyra bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat despite the cold air curling through the cabin. Thorne stirred beside her, instantly awake, eyes flashing gold. Another vision? Worse, a memory. Or maybe a warning. He sat up, already reaching for his trousers. "What did you see?" "My sister." He stilled. Lyra swung her legs over the side of the bed, clutching the pendant at her throat. Her mother's last gift before she died. The edges felt sharper than she remembered, as if the magic inside it had begun to stir again. "I think she's alive, Thorne. I think she's with him." Thorne's expression darkened. "Kaelin." She nodded. He found her. And now, she's waking up. By midday, the remaining leaders of the Crescent Fang Pack and their allies had gathered inside the ancient Hall of Stone, an underground chamber carved into the heart of the mountain, lit by floating crystals and fire wolves conjured by spellcasters. Lyra stood at the head of the crescent table beside Thorne, her hands steady, her voice calm, but her heart thundered with dread. "My sister Cerys is alive. She was taken as a child, hidden by the High Elders, and sealed in a stasis tomb. Kaelin has found her." Murmurs erupted like sparks catching kindling. "She has power equal to mine. Maybe greater," Lyra continued, "and if he turns her, if he corrupts her, she could wipe out every living soul on this side of the continent," finished Malric, now bandaged and standing tall beside a map of the region. We've all heard the prophecies. 2 daughters born of fire and frost. 1 to raise empires. 1 to destroy them. And no one ever told me I had a sister, Lyra said bitterly. They wanted to use us, split our power so we could never awaken fully. Thorne stepped forward, voice grim. We prepare for war, but we also prepare to save her. You would risk everything for her? One of the elders asked. Even if she becomes Kaelin's weapon? Lyra met his gaze. Because if I don't, I'll lose myself too. Meanwhile, in the Black Temple, Sarah stood in a garden of thorns and obsidian. Her hair floated around her like moon silk, and her eyes flickered between silver and black. Kaelin watched her from the shadows, his expression unreadable. You don't remember me, he said gently, feeding her lies like honey. But we were once family. Family? She whispered. Then why do I feel hollow? Kaelin stepped closer, brushing her hair behind her ear. Because they broke you, locked you away, told the world you never existed. But I found you. I loved you. Saris looked at him, uncertain. Am I dangerous? He smiled faintly. You are perfect. In the days that followed, Lyra trained like a wolf possessed. She pushed the warriors through drills until they collapsed, taught them how to fight shadow beasts conjured from spirit magic, and sparred with Thorne until their blades sparked against one another like lightning. But she also trained her mind. The spirit inside her had grown quieter since the mating bond completed, but it still whispered when she was alone, still flared with hunger when her emotions peaked. You are close, it murmured one night, as she bathed in a spring under the moonlight. Soon you won't need him, you won't need anyone. She gritted her teeth. I'll never be what Kaelin wants. You will be worse, it purred. But then Thorne was behind her, stepping into the water, his presence grounding her like it always did. He pulled her into his arms, resting his forehead against hers. You're not alone, he whispered. I feel like I'm coming undone. Then let me hold you together. And she let him, a promise carved in blood on the eve of battle. Lyra and Thorne stood before the Temple of Luna, where ancient Alpha Bloodlines once took their vows. The moon hung swollen above them, full and crimson. There were no priests, no rituals, just them. I don't know if I'll survive this, Lyra said. Thorne stepped closer. Then I'll die beside you. No, she gripped his shirt. You live, you lead, no matter what happens to me. I can't promise that. You have to. His eyes shone with tears he would never shed. Then he pulled a dagger from his belt and sliced his palm. Lyra did the same. They pressed their hands together, blood mingling. I swear, he said, to follow you into darkness, and to carry your light when you forget how to shine. She smiled through the sting. And I swear, she whispered, to love you even if I forget who I am. The moon pulsed once above them, as if it heard, and fate shifted. Kaelin sat in his throne of bones and whispers. Sarah stood before him now in a dress made of night fire, her aura flaring bright with stolen magic. I remember her, she said softly. Kaelin tilted his head. And I loved her. And now? Saris raised her hand. The runes on her skin glowed blood red. Now I will kill her. Chapter 18, Sister to Flame, Sister to Frost. The wind screamed down the mountain like a mourning mother. The sky had bruised itself in shades of violet and blood red. It was the kind of mourning that reeked of fate. War was coming, not just a battle of swords and claws, but of legacy, of bloodlines, of sisters pulled apart by time and torn in half by power. Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the northern valley, her newly forged armor catching the faint morning light. It was silver steel, laced with moonstone and fire runes, armor meant for a warrior, but worn by a queen. Below her, thousands of wolves waited, some in fur, some in skin, all bound to the Crescent Fang Pack. Fighters, healers, mystics, males and females, elders and teens. Every single soul had chosen to rise when they could have fled. Thorne stood beside her, tall and unshakable, a pillar of calm in the rising storm. He looked at her now, not like a soldier, like her mate. Are you ready? She didn't lie. No. He nodded. Good. Because only fools are ready for war. The enemy came like fog. Not in orderly lines but like a virus, spilling across the land from the dead forests to the east, where Kaelin's black temple had grown taller in the distance like a desecrated god. His soldiers were twisted things, corrupted wolves with eyes like broken glass, and skin that shimmered in unnatural tones. They were fast, deadly, feral. Some didn't even look fully alive. But it wasn't them that Lyra feared most, it was her. Cerys, her sister, now Kaelin's most powerful weapon. The two armies met in the Valley of Hollow Stars. Snow soaked in blood turned the earth to rust. Battle cries rang out, echoing through the mountains. Wolves lunged, teeth flashing. Arrows screamed through the air. Magic exploded in colored bursts. Blue frost, red fire, green wind. Lyra fought at the front. Her blade was a blur, her wolf close to the surface, snarling beneath her skin. She fought like someone with nothing left to lose, like someone who had already died once and come back with vengeance in her heart. But even with Thorne at her side, even with Malric commanding the left flank and the healers protected in the rear, she could feel the tide beginning to turn. The enemy wasn't fighting to win, they were fighting to delay. That's when she felt it, the cold snap in her soul, the twin tug of ancient magic breaking free. She turned, and saw her. Cerys floated above the battlefield like a fallen star. Her long white hair snapped in the wind, her gown made of dark flames. Magic bled from her fingers in crackling whips of frost and obsidian. Her eyes weren't silver anymore, they were mirror black, and they locked onto Lyra. "Sister," she whispered. But it echoed like thunder, all fighting stilled. Even the wolves held their breath. Lyra took a step forward. "Cerys, you remember me?" A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. "I remember pain." Kaelin appeared beside her in a ripple of smoke, placing his hand on her shoulder. "She remembers betrayal." "Let her speak for herself," Lyra growled, but Kaelin's grip tightened. "Tell her, Cerys," he coaxed. "Tell her what they did to you. Tell her what the elders made me undo." Cerys's face twitched. "They locked me away, sealed my soul. They said I was unclean." "You were powerful," Lyra said. "Too powerful for them to control." "I waited for you," Cerys whispered. "I didn't know." Lyra's voice broke. "If I had, gods, if I had. It doesn't matter." Kaelin's voice was smooth, cruel. "She belongs to me now." Cerys raised her hand. A spear of frost screamed through the air. Lyra barely dodged it. The battle resumed like a volcano erupting. But now, the eye of the storm was between the two sisters. They circled each other, magic thrumming between them, two halves of an ancient whole, one born of frost, one born of flame. Cerys struck first, sending a blast of freezing wind toward Lyra. Lyra countered with fire, and where the magics met, steam hissed and the ground cracked. "I don't want to fight you," Lyra shouted, deflecting another shard of black ice. "Then die," Cerys screamed, and her magic surged. But Lyra didn't back down. She reached inside herself not for her rage, but for her heart, for the years they should have had together, the nights she used to pray for a sister she didn't know she had. "I loved you before I even knew your name," she whispered, pushing her palm forward. A beam of golden fire burst from her hand, warmer, brighter, more human than anything Cerys had ever seen. It struck her full in the chest, and Cerys screamed, collapsing to her knees. But Lyra didn't strike again. She walked slowly, painfully toward her. "I'm not your enemy," she said softly. "He is." Cerys looked up, eyes flickering, and Kaelin snarled. Kaelin launched forward, claws bared, shadows trailing behind him like wings. But Thorne was faster. He collided with Kaelin mid-air, and the two alphas clashed in a storm of fur and fury. Blood sprayed. Magic crackled. They vanished into a whirl of flame and fang. Lyra knelt before Cerys, cupping her face. "You're not lost," she whispered. "Come back, please." Cerys trembled. Then she screamed, and the magic exploded outward in a shockwave that knocked Lyra back 10 feet. When the smoke cleared, Cerys was gone, taken again. And Kaelin's army began to retreat. The field was broken, the snow was red, dozens had died, hundreds were wounded, and though the Crescent Fang Pack had survived, no one felt like celebrating. Lyra limped toward Thorne, who was covered in blood that wasn't all his. He caught her and pulled her close. "She remembered you," he whispered. "Not enough, she will." Chapter 19. The road to the Well of Ancients the Dead were buried by moonlight. No fire, no fanfare, just the wind whispering over the valley, through burned trees and broken spears. Wolves, both in fur and human form, stood in silence as their fallen kin were lowered into the earth. Lyra knelt by the last grave, her fingers brushing the carved nameplate, Ison, seer of Moonshade. He had been one of their oldest spellcasters, a father of 4, killed by a corrupted shadow wolf while protecting a child not his own. There were too many graves, too many stories that would never be told. "I'll remember them all," she whispered. Behind her, Thorne stood silent. He didn't speak unless she wanted him to. That was one of the things she had grown to love most about him. Not just his strength, not just his alpha's calm, but the way he saw her, respected her grief without needing to fix it. She stood slowly, wiped the dirt from her palms, and turned to him. "We're running out of time." He nodded once. "Then we finish it." The Well of Ancients. According to ancient shifter legend, there were 4 wells scattered across the world, deep pools of raw elemental magic from the beginning of time. Most were sealed, hidden beneath mountains or oceans, but one remained open, the Well of Ancients, said to grant whoever stepped into it complete access to the original source of magic, to rewrite fate, to bend the living and the dead to their will. That was where Kaelin was going, that was where Cerys was being led, and that was where Lyra had to go, no matter the cost. Inside the war room, Lyra stood before a map scorched at the corners. Behind her, Malric leaned on a cane, still recovering from his shattered leg. On her right stood Thorne. On her left, 3 mages, twin sisters Sireya and Nema, and old Theo, who had once been a warlock in exile. "We have one path," she said, "through the cursed forest, across the Wraith River, then straight into the Whispering Vale." "The forest is alive," Nema warned. "It eats magic. The river will drown anything that bleeds," Sireya added. "And the veil is cursed to show you the worst truths of your soul," Theo finished. Lyra didn't flinch. "Then we walk with courage, silence, and no lies." She turned to Thorne. "You'll lead the rest of the army through the western ridge, surround Kaelin from behind when I draw him out." His face tightened. "You want to go alone?" She shook her head. "Not alone, just ahead. I have to reach Cerys before he forces her to bond with the well." Thorne clenched his jaw. "You're not expendable, Lyra. You're not just a key to this war." "I know," she said softly. "I'm more than that. I'm your mate." And she kissed him like she meant it. They left under starlight. Lyra, Malric, the 3 mages, 2 elite warriors, 7 in total. The path through the cursed forest was narrow, and the trees whispered. Literally, ancient shifter spirits bound to bark and bone. Lyra could hear them as they passed, daughter of fire, sister of frost. You walk a path that cannot be walked twice, choose wisely, or lose everything. At the river, Nema nearly died. The water rose up like a serpent, trying to drown her in memory. Lyra pulled her back with a blast of flame and sacrifice, a silver coin of her own soul magic. Then came the veil. They walked through a mist that was too thick, too cold, and it showed them things. Malric saw his dead mate, accusing him of betrayal. Theo heard every curse he'd ever cast in reverse. Lyra saw Cerys, as a child, reaching for her. "Why didn't you come?" "I didn't know," Lyra whispered to the hallucination. "You knew something was missing. You just didn't want to know." She fell to her knees, sobbing, until a hand gripped her shoulder. "Thorne, he wasn't supposed to be there. You followed me. Of course I did. You disobeyed. I love you, Lyra. I would follow you into death." And that brought her back. They reached the well on the 7th day. It wasn't what Lyra expected. No glowing pool, no altar, just a hole in the world, pure white light spiraling up into the clouds. The air buzzed like a scream on mute. The ground trembled, magic warped the air in ripples, and Kaelin stood at its edge. Cerys stood beside him, trembling. Her skin was pale. Her eyes were her own again. "Lyra," she said softly. "He lied to me." Kaelin turned slowly. His smile was hollow. "Too late. She's mine." "No," Cerys whispered. "I choose her." And then Kaelin struck. A lance of pure void magic exploded toward Lyra. But Cerys stepped in front of her, took the blow, and fell. "No!" Lyra screamed, catching her sister's body as she crumpled. Cerys looked up at her, blood trickling from her lips. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you. You didn't. You came back. That's all that matters." Thorne leapt toward Kaelin, claws slashing. The others joined. Battle exploded around the well. But Lyra only saw her sister. And in that moment, something ancient inside her shattered and reformed. Lyra's magic burned white-hot, not fire, not frost, something older. Time itself seemed to pause. She rose, glowing with power. Kaelin turned and saw death in her eyes. "You tried to break me," Lyra said. "You used us, lied, killed. Power is survival," he snarled. "No, love is." She raised her hand, and the magic surged. Not to kill, but to unbind. She struck the well, not Kaelin, and the energy reversed, dragging every stolen fragment of power out of him, out of the land, out of the war itself. He screamed and vanished. 3 months later, the valley bloomed with spring. Cerys lived, her soul slowly healing under the care of mystics. Lyra ruled beside Thorne, not as Alpha, but as the heart of the pack. They had been broken, but now they were whole. Chapter 20. The moon chooses again. The war was over. The land was quiet in a way that felt reverent, as though even the birds knew not to sing too loudly. The Crescent Fang Pack had rebuilt slowly, choosing peace over haste, memory over motion. The valley had begun to breathe again. Snow thawed into wildflowers, scarred trees grew new limbs, rivers, once red with blood, now sparkled with starlight and new beginnings. At the center of it all was Lyra. Not a warrior anymore, not just a mate, not even a queen, but something older, a survivor, a sister, a soul restored. It began as the moon reached her zenith, round and white above the sacred clearing where the final ritual would be held. Not a coronation, not a wedding, but something more primal, a binding under the moon, a vow older than language, spoken not just to each other but to the land, to the pack, to the wild gods who watched from the shadows between stars. Lyra stood barefoot on moss, her gown stitched from silver silk and wolf fur. Her arms were inked in runes that shimmered faintly with moonlight. Her hair was braided in twin coils, one for fire, one for frost, honoring her past and present, Cerys and herself. Thorne waited beneath the stone arch, shirtless, solemn, powerful. His torso bore the scars of battle, his eyes the softness of surrender, and when she stepped into the circle, the world seemed to hold its breath. Malric began the rite, his voice low and ancient. "You have both walked the fire, you have both bled for each other, for this land, for what you now choose. Speak now and let the moon listen." Thorne turned first. He didn't read from anything, didn't prepare, he just spoke, and it was enough to make Lyra's knees weaken. "You are my mate, not because the stars said so, not because magic chose us, but because every time I've been broken, it's your voice I heard in the dark. Because your strength made me brave enough to stop hiding from my own. You saved me, not just from Kaelin, from myself. I don't want a throne, I want you, every day, every scar, every breath." Then it was Lyra's turn, and her voice trembled but never wavered. "You found me when I had nothing left, when I didn't even know who I was. You stood beside me while I raged, while I mourned, while I questioned everything. You never tried to control me, only reminded me I was never alone. I choose you, not as my king, not as my alpha, but as the wolf who made me feel like more than a weapon. I love you." She pressed her forehead to his. Their magic, fire and earth, wove together, forming a crown of light above them both, and then, Malric smiled. "Then by the old ways and the new, under the eye of the moon, you are mated." Cheers rose like thunder from the trees. Wolves howled. Flowers bloomed. Magic shimmered across the sky like auroras. They left the clearing slowly, hand in hand, fingers tangled tightly together. No one followed. The night was theirs. Their den was waiting. A sacred place newly built near the edge of the cliff where Lyra had once stood watching the valley below. Now, she would live in it. Thorne opened the wooden door, carved with their crest, and stood back to let her enter first. She turned to him. "Don't be gentle," she whispered, voice breathless. "But don't rush. I want to feel it all." The room was warm, lit by soft candles, pelts thrown across the floor, a bed made of cedar and velvet, and memories yet to be made. Thorne stepped toward her like he was stepping into a sacred forest. His hands found her waist. Her fingers traced the scars on his chest. He kissed her, slow and deep, until the rest of the world disappeared, and when he touched her, it wasn't like a lover. It was like someone touching the sun for the first time, knowing it could burn him but needing it anyway. He undressed her slowly, reverently. and she did the same to him, drinking in every inch of muscle and man and mate. When they finally came together, it wasn't violent, it wasn't desperate, it was complete, a claiming that was both primal and holy. She arched beneath him, moaning his name like a prayer. He whispered hers against her skin like a secret. Over and over, they moved together, matching breath for breath, pulse for pulse. When they shattered, they did so together, a shared explosion of everything they had held back, everything they had fought for, everything they had become. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, tangled in sweat and love and something unnameable, Lyra whispered into his chest, "I never thought I'd get a happy ending." And Thorne, half asleep, murmured, "This isn't the ending. This is just the beginning." 1 month later, Saris actually laughed. She was sitting in the wildflower field with Soraya, sketching in the dirt with a stick, her eyes bright and hers again. Lyra watched from the hill, smiling. Malric limped past, carrying a basket of honey bread and muttering about young wolves being too loud these days. Peace had returned. Not because war had disappeared, but because love had survived it. Lyra touched her belly unconsciously. Not yet, but someday. And when that day came, the child would be born into a world that had been bought with blood and love and moonlight. A world worth protecting. She turned back to Thorne, who stood barefoot in the grass, waiting for her with open arms. She walked to him, and this time there was no fear, only joy. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.